Welcome to the Book of Wellbeing podcast, a place to help you to understand, manage and improve your mental health and wellbeing, where you will find the knowledge, guidance and tools you need to improve your life and where you can build your own wellbeing toolkit to take with you. Everywhere we go now in our modern world, we see people, including ourselves, with their heads stuck in their phones. They're everywhere and they're glued to us like our lives depend on it. Excessive smartphone use is a problem for most people who own one. It starts off with a curiosity and an interest. Then the more we use them, the more they become a habit. And then they turn into a form of addiction. We can't quite put them down. We feel lost without them. Now, smartphones are fascinating and clever things. They can do a lot of things that would have been hard to believe years ago, and they have some really good uses. They aren't all bad, but they become bad for us when we use them for things that aren't necessary or helpful, and when we scroll endlessly in a trance-like state. We're wasting our precious time on these small gadgets with more to lose than to gain from that time. The consequences don't just stop at lost time, they're impacting on our well-being and either worsen or cause mental health problems. And most of the time, we don't even realise that it's this small object that's making us feel low, tired and anxious, or contributing to those feelings. We wake up in the morning and straight away check our phones and scroll through social media. Does this fill you with get up and go motivation, ready to start the day? Probably not. We're waiting for something, an appointment, the bus or somebody. We check and scroll. We're bored. We check and scroll. We're putting off things that need to be done. We check and scroll. We have time to ourselves that we don't often get, so we check and scroll. We try to get to sleep at night, check and scroll, and so on. Think about this. How much time are you spending on your phone each day? The chances are you're going to underestimate this amount of time because we enter a trance-like state when we're on them and we lose our sense of time. It's wasted. iPhones have this clever but terrifying function of tracking your daily usage. If you have one, use this to find out how much you're actually using it, or as a way of trying to work to reduce the time that it's telling you you're on them every day. If you don't have an iPhone, keep a mental track or a note of how much time you're spending on it. You might not even need to do this because you might already know the answer. It's a lot of time. Another thing I've observed over the past several years is that people of all ages are using their phones as a coping strategy for social anxiety. Do you get anxious or paranoid walking down the street or through town or in public places? Does it feel uncomfortable? And do you stick your head in your phone as a way of managing these feelings? This may seem like a helpful method, but it's not. It's likely making the problem bigger because it's avoidance. It's avoidance of social interaction and contact and learning to be comfortable in society and around people, and will not help you to overcome these anxious or paranoid thoughts. Thoughts like people are looking at you or thinking about you. We go on social media to look at other people's lives, and we're fundamentally giving over our own time and life to other people's by doing this. And of course, sometimes this isn't harmful. We're keeping up to date with our loved ones' lives, our friends, colleagues, family, and this is great. But there's a fine line because eventually this shifts from curiosity and interest to comparison. We start to compare other people's lives to our own, and this causes us to feel inadequate. This can then make us feel low and down. Maybe not obviously, but from this moment, keep an eye on your mood when you're on social media. And for a lot of people, you'll notice that this is affecting your mood in a negative way. All of this time spent on our phones is stealing our life and our capacity to enjoy more of life, to make memories and to fill our time with meaningful things, to communicate and appreciate each other. Is your phone making you happy? So let's think more about when our phone is more helpful to us and when it isn't. If we think back to the very purpose the phone was created, it was to speak and communicate, to give and receive messages. So as long as it's healthy communication, it's fine to use your phone for this purpose it was created for. The same for text messages. So long as it's healthy communication, all of that is fine. It's probably more helpful. Other helpful uses of a mobile phone can be to let us know the time, to keep notes and reminders, the alarm function, to check the weather, take photos, book things, order things. Generally, these functions have a helpful purpose so long as they're not used excessively, to the point that they are turning into obsession. Even social media can be purposeful at times, but more often than not, we're spending far too much time on it, and it's wasting our lives. The most commonly used social media apps are Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, all a platform for viewing and comparing other people's lives to our own, and not always a realistic one at that. Most people are only showing you the version that they want you to see, and not real life. So we develop a perception that other people have exciting and perfect lives, when in reality, life isn't a perfect photo book. One of the most important things we need for healthy well-being and mental health is social interaction, being and feeling connected to others, belonging and being part of a community in some way. And social media is not how we fulfill this need. It may have been helpful during the pandemic when we had lockdowns, and smartphones have been invaluable in some ways for this, for keeping us connected. But in real life, we can't replace that necessity of human interaction with social media. It can be an extra but not a replacement. All of this overuse of our phones is stealing our time. It's stealing our capacity to be able to reach and achieve goals and to make our lives more exciting, more colourful, and more meaningful. And we need to take that time back because we don't want to look back in years to come and think, what did I do with my life? And have memories of spending endless time on phones. We want to look back at our lives and think we made memories, we done things with our time, no matter how small, but we didn't waste it with our eyes stuck to a screen. To recap, we know that we're spending and wasting a lot of our time on our phone. We know now that they have some good uses, but they also have some negative uses. We've learnt that excessive phone use worsens our mood, our motivation, and our anxieties, and that we can develop a misconception that it's fulfilling our social interaction and communication needs with others. In order to live a full and interesting life, not only to achieve, but to help us to cope with adversities, we need to be making the most of it, to be setting those goals, to be making those memories, and to be living our lives. For the toolkit, I'm going to introduce a few strategies that can help you to manage the time you spend on your phone. The first one is swap the app. So have a think about the apps you have on your smartphone, and now you're going to be thinking about how they're making you feel and keeping an eye on your mood when you're on them. The ones that you're spending too much time on, that you're struggling to stop or reduce this time because there's so much of a habit, probably things like Facebook and Instagram, delete the app. You don't have to delete your account, you can just delete your app for a few days or a week and you can get it back at any moment. But deleting it can make it less accessible and less of a habit. The next part of this strategy is to think about the apps that you're using and replace them with some apps that might be more helpful. There's loads of apps out there that have a helpful function. They're not as bad for us as social media. Things like Pinterest, that's a really good one for inspiration and creativity. The Calm app, so this one has some really good helpful exercises for managing anxiety, getting to sleep, meditation. There's a paid version of that, but there is a free one too. YouTube. looking at videos that make us laugh, or self-help videos, or listening to music that cheers us up. Have a research apps that would be helpful to you and try them. Replace those ones for the ones that aren't very helpful. It can be scary to think about not using an app that we're used to, not being connected through Facebook. But we feel like this because we have a dependency on using that app. The world's not going to end if you're not on it. You're not going to miss out on life. You're just going to gain extra time for yourself. The next thing we need to do is try to make our phone less accessible and keep it out of reach so that we can't pick it up as often. And to do this, try to get in the habit of putting it somewhere out of reach. Put it in a drawer somewhere or in another room from where you are. This might be worrying if you have children or a caring role and you're worried about missing a call. But you can keep it on. You can keep it on loud. It just doesn't have to be somewhere you can see it and pick it up as easily. The more you do this physical act of keeping the phone out of reach, the more that will become a habit rather than reaching for the phone and going on it when you don't need to. To help to keep you motivated to stop wasting all of this time on your phone, think about all of the things that you could do with that time instead of being on it. So is it going for your to-do list and doing something off there? Maybe it's doing a job in the house. Maybe it's just picking up a book or doing something different. But use that time to the best that you can rather than wasting it. Another strategy that you can use is to stick a post-it note on the back of your phone with your to-do list on, or with a list of things that you can do instead of going on it. The last thing to do to try to help reduce the time on your phone is to turn notifications on as many apps as you have off. This can be daunting because you want to see when you have messages, etc. But turning the notifications off will stop you getting distracted when your phone flashes because something's came up. Nothing terrible will happen if you do this. If somebody really wants you or something happens and someone needs to contact you immediately, they will. They'll phone you and you'll see. But turn the notifications off. I know that this is a difficult one for most people, and trying to reduce the time on your phone might well be very difficult because it is a habit. But do the strategies that I've told you in small steps. It doesn't have to be all at once. You don't have to not go on your phone all day. It might just be about reducing the time first, or doing the things like putting it out of arm's reach so that it's not as accessible. Try to make new habits. And the more you do this, the more you will realise how much time you were wasting on your phone and how much of this time can be used for better things like self-care, looking after yourself, getting things done that you need to get done, working towards goals, making a better use of your time and feeling happier, feeling better, less comparison to other people's lives, but more focus on your own. That's the end of today's episode. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow the Instagram and Facebook page at The Book of Wellbeing for more inspiration and advice. Have a nice week.